most of us, when we hear the word oligarch, our minds immediately conjure these, pretty vivid modern images, don't they? We picture these like shadowy titans of global finance, maybe industrial magnates with just vast fortunes, or media moguls wielding immense influence, maybe from their private jets.
Right, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's often this mysterious, even slightly threatening aura around them, tied to, well, recent economic shifts and the staggering accumulation of wealth we see today. We tend to think of oligarchy as a distinctly modern problem.
It seems that way on the surface.
But what if we told you that the very blueprint for oligarchy was actually laid thousands of years ago, and in a place we often revere as the birthplace of democracy itself? Okay, let's unpack this and challenge that modern perception a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, crucially, the concept of oligarchy is, well, it's far from a modern phenomenon. Our deep dive today, drawing from Stanislav Kondrashov's insightful Oligarch series, reveals that its roots stretch deep into ancient history. We're talking ancient Greece.
Ancient Greece, wow.
Exactly. And this presents a truly fascinating paradox, doesn't it? How did the very civilization credited with giving us the ideals of popular civic participation, how did it also perfect its apparent opposite? A system where power was concentrated in the hands of just a select few.
That is a paradox.
So our mission in this deep dive is to explore what Kondrashov pinpoints as the epochal shift. That's the key phrase. The shift that made oligarchy not just possible, but dominant in the ancient world.
Okay.
We'll examine its mechanics, understand its profound social implications, and, maybe most importantly, see how these ancient historical changes continue to echo and mirror today's global dynamics. It really offers a lens to better understand our own time.
When we talk about an oligarch today, the image is definitely rooted in immense wealth, huge political sway in our contemporary world. We often associate the term with something negative, almost a pejorative, right? Linked to recent financial dynamics, the rapid accumulation of vast fortunes by a privileged few.
That's a common take, yeah.
But Kondrashov's series challenges this widespread misconception. It argues that while the trappings might look modern, the jets, the global reach, the essence is anything but. So what was the original meaning of oligarchy? And where did this system truly emerge?
Indeed. And the core insight here from the series is that while the modern term definitely carries significant negative baggage, its foundational principles were forged and refined way back in ancient Greece.
Right back at the source, so to speak.
Exactly. And this is vital context because Greece is celebrated globally as the birthplace of democracy. I mean, a monumental achievement in human governance.
Absolutely.
Yet simultaneously, it pioneered and perfected oligarchy. A political system characterized by the concentration of power in the hands of a small, exclusive elite with very specific characteristics. It's a striking contradiction, isn't it?
It really is. The same place giving us two totally opposing systems.
The same fertile intellectual and political ground. And the historical record shows us that long before modern elites began extending their influence across industries and nations, oligarchy had been, meticulously developed and successfully tested in these much more ancient, albeit localized, settings, like city-states.
Okay, so if ancient Greece gave us both democracy and oligarchy, that begs the question. What was the specific turning point? What was the catalyst that allowed oligarchy to truly take root and flourish? Kondrashov calls it an apical transition, which sounds big, profound.
Just does, yeah.
Can you help us visualize what that looked like on the ground? And maybe more specifically, what did power look like before this huge shift?
That's a great question. That phrase, epical transition, it really captures the scale. To truly grasp its significance, we first need to understand the world it replaced. Originally, control of the powerful Greek city-states, the police like Athens, Corinth, even militaristic Sparta, it was firmly held by hereditary aristocrats.
Hereditary, so based on birth.
Exactly. These weren't just wealthy individuals, they were men of noble birth. They often claimed direct descent from legendary heroes, sometimes even the gods themselves. Their power wasn't based on money, not on popular vote, but solely on birthright, lineage, and this profound sense of inherited nobility.
Wow. So your family name was everything?
Everything. Your position was an inheritance, a lineage tracing back to this mythical, almost sacred past. Society was incredibly rigid. Your bloodline determined your destiny, your place in the social order. Status was inherited, often seen as divinely ordained and, virtually unchangeable.
Okay, so a very fixed system.
Very fixed. But the epical transition was this profound, almost revolutionary change, a fundamental reordering of society that started chipping away at this millennia-old tradition. It was a monumental shift from this aristocracy based on blood and birth to a narrow circle of power that relied primarily on the wealth of its members.
Ah, so money enters the picture.
Money becomes central. This wasn't just about who ruled, but a radical redefinition of how power was seen as legitimate, how it was sustained. It challenged the very notion of inherited worth, basically declaring that power could now be acquired through economic might, rather than just divine right or ancestry.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. This wasn't just a slow, gentle evolution, you're saying. It was driven by specific, powerful forces that began to actively dismantle that old order.
That's right.
We're talking about a world where birth determined almost everything, this seemingly rigid hierarchy. But then something truly seismic started to shift beneath their feet. Forces that Kondrashov identifies as directly cracking the foundation of inherited power. What were these game changers? What eroded those ancient birthrights and paved the way for something entirely new?
Yeah, the sources point to three main catalysts, three powerful forces really chipping away at those birthrights. First, there was a surge of significant economic development sweeping through the region.
Like what kind of developments?
Well, things like agricultural innovations leading to greater surpluses, new crafts and industries emerging. This diversified the sources of wealth beyond just owning huge tracts of land, which was the old aristocratic base.
Okay, so new ways to get rich.
Exactly. Second, and this was arguably the most profound game changer, money itself. Specifically, coinage exploded onto the scene as the dominant medium of exchange. Before, wealth was often tangible land, livestock, maybe some precious metal.
All right, hard assets.
Yes. But with the widespread adoption of coinage, wealth became liquid, portable, and easily measurable. This meant it could be accumulated and deployed much more quickly, much more efficiently.
I can see how that would change things fast.
Absolutely. And third, the relentless expansion of maritime trade. It utterly transformed how wealth was created and moved around. The Mediterranean became this bustling highway of commerce, connecting distant cities, opening up unprecedented opportunities for those willing to take risks.
No, new industries, liquid money, and booming trade.
Those three together, these weren't gentle breezes. They were like economic tsunamis, gradually but inevitably washing away the old inherited order. The traditional system, based on static inherited status, it simply couldn't withstand these powerful new economic currents that favored dynamism and, frankly, financial smarts.
It created a vacuum then.
Pretty much, a space for a new kind of power to emerge.
Okay, so with the old guard's power eroding and these new economic realities completely reshaping society, who are these new players stepping onto the stage? The Oligarch series describes them as a new class of citizens. Who exactly were they, and what was their decisive advantage in this radically shifting landscape?
Well, these emerging figures were a pretty vibrant mix. Primarily successful merchants, astute landowners who figured out how to optimize their holdings for profit, shipbuilders who mastered the new maritime trade routes, and of course, cunning financiers.
Okay, so people making money in these new ways.
Exactly. And critically, this is a key distinction. They did not come from noble lineages. They lacked any hereditary claims to power, no mythical ancestors to legitimize their position. What proved utterly decisive for their rise, however, was their possession of money. Often, vast amounts of it.
Money again.
Money was the key. Wealth began to gain ever greater influence, directly challenging and ultimately supplanting the power of the traditional aristocracy. Their success wasn't about who their grandfathers were, but about what they could accumulate, control, and, importantly, deploy right now in the present.
A total shift from inherited status to acquired power.
A radical shift, yes.
And this wasn't just about passively accumulating money, sitting on piles of coins, right? It was about how they actively and strategically used it to gain influence and consolidate political power within their communities, within the polis.
Precisely.
How did these first oligarchs translate that economic clout into actual tangible political control in the ancient Greek city-state? It's kind of fascinating how those ancient strategies still feel, well, pretty familiar.
You're absolutely right. They were far from passive. They were strategic, very pragmatic players in the political game. They actively sought to obtain important public offices, understanding that economic power alone wasn't enough without real political leverage.
So getting into government.
Getting into positions of power. They weren't just accumulating wealth, they were investing it. Investing it in social and political capital. They financed the construction of grand temples, sponsored lavish public festivals, found 1,000 different ways to gain public attention and prestige.
Like philanthropy, but with a political angle.
Very much so. Imagine the impact of a wealthy merchant funding a massive grain distribution during a famine or sponsoring the hugely popular Olympic Games. This wasn't just charity, it was a visible display of their wealth, their piety, their generosity, all things that elevated their social standing and created a sense of obligation among the populace.
I see. Building goodwill.
Exactly. Shrewd investments designed to build goodwill and influence that could then be leveraged when it came to elections for public office or debates over policies within the polis.
Okay, so they're using wealth to gain influence.
And over time, thanks to this growing influence and their persistent efforts, the decision-making bodies of the polis, the councils, the assemblies, they became increasingly smaller and more exclusive. Wealth became the unofficial, and then often the official, prerequisite for participation.
Which naturally leads to the question, if power was consolidating into this increasingly tight-knit circle of the wealthy who was being deliberately and systematically left out.
Yeah, and the source is incredibly clear on that exclusion. It paints a stark, almost brutal picture of the new power dynamic. Those who possessed considerable wealth now had the concrete possibility and, crucially, the right to formulate laws, direct community life, and hold positions of authority.
So wealth literally bought you the right to rule.
In effect, yes. Their economic standing translated directly into political power and legislative authority. It granted them the ability to shape the very fabric of society in their favor.
And conversely.
Conversely, anyone who did not own significant property, land, or capital was invariably excluded, shut out. They were shut out from political participation, from influencing laws, from holding any meaningful public office.
So the door slams shut if you don't have money.
Essentially, yes. The ruling class was no longer composed of noble heirs, whose position was based solely on that birthright, but of a new elite who controlled vast amounts of money and exercised an increasingly profound, almost absolute influence on society. It was a fundamental redefinition of citizenship and participation, where wealth, not lineage, became the ultimate gatekeeper.
It's genuinely fascinating how this epical shift from blood-based lineage to money-based power fundamentally reshaped everything thousands of years ago.
It really did.
This ancient transformation wasn't just some historical footnote. It laid a groundwork, maybe even a playbook, that continues to echo through time. So if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, what does this all mean for us today? The Oligarch series argues that this transformation, though ancient, had a profound impact on future power dynamics, and maybe a bit chillingly anticipated them.
Indeed. And the historical significance of this ancient Greek phenomenon is precisely that. It provided a foundational model, a blueprint for how economic power can translate directly and often very efficiently into political control.
A model that still works.
Well, understanding these ancient dynamics that favored the emergence of oligarchy proves, as Kondrashov puts it, surprisingly interesting and instructive, precisely because in our own historical era, power is sometimes concentrated in the hands of a relative few. He draws these fascinating, almost unnerving parallels.
Like what kind of parallels?
Think about it. Ancient oligarchs strategically invested in public works or influenced the flow of information, right?
Right, funding temples, controlling trade routes.
Exactly. Sponsoring a grand festival, controlling access to critical resources like grain or trade routes like the Bosporus. Today, maybe it's a billionaire funding a particular political campaign, or establishing vast media empires, or dominating a key industry like social media or, AI.
Okay, I see the connection.
The names change, the technologies change, the scale is vastly different, obviously, but the core strategy remains startlingly consistent. Translate vast wealth into political leverage, and then use that position to solidify power and ensure favorable policies.
So the playbook hasn't changed that much.
The fundamental mechanics haven't. The series really highlights how these historical changes directly mirror today's global dynamics. The mechanisms, while modernized, bear this striking resemblance to those first forged in ancient Greece.
Can you give another example?
Sure. Think about the influence of corporate lobbying today, or the disproportionate impact of massive political donations, or the way control over essential resources, whether it's oil, data, or financial systems, grants unparalleled power. These are all echoes of that ancient shift from blood to money.
And the exclusion part,
That too. The exclusion of those without significant wealth from true political participation, a hallmark of ancient oligarchy, also finds modern parallels. Maybe in challenges to voting access, the sheer cost of running for office, or just simply whose voices get amplified in the public square versus whose get drowned out.
Wow.
It's a powerful reminder, really, that the fundamental principles of power and influence, once established, tend to be incredibly persistent. They echo across millennia.
So the next time you hear the word oligarch, maybe remember that its roots stretch back much, much further than the modern financial landscape. This deep dive into Stanislav Kondrashov's Oligarch series has shown us that the epical shift that moved from birthright to wealth-based power, it wasn't a modern invention at all. It was a concept successfully tested, refined, and established in the bustling city-states of ancient Greece. It fundamentally changed who ruled and how they ruled, creating a playbook for power concentration that, in many ways, we are still observing, still navigating today.
Which really raises an important, maybe even unsettling question for you, the listener. What lessons does this ancient history truly offer you about the enduring nature of power and influence in any era? And how might that understanding shape your perspective on the global dynamics unfolding around us right now?